don't turn your audio.
Well, I'm gonna have to somehow.
No, because it'll go through the mics,
Oh.
through that system.
So I'm good.
Just leave it, yeah, don't touch the audio. Yeah,
Sure got
it
the
will
right
pick
one?
up through your mics.
I'm worried about this cord.
So again, a reminder to council on your cameras, or on your mics, you need to have them close to you. Councillor Smith, they couldn't hear you in the public meeting when you were speaking last time. Mic's not close enough to you. You have a soft voice and it just, just make it closer to you.
Sorry about that.
First time you've ever heard that, eh?
Yeah, I'm quite shocked.
Okay, we are live streamed.
Graham, you see?
Is Kyle coming back? Start with Kyle.
It's a live stream, so I think he's.
I'm in there, so I just want to test my microphone to make sure it's working. I was if I can share my screen in advance here to help get ready.
We hear you fine.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right. Called a public meeting to discuss proposed zoning bylaw amendment to order. We're looking at file D14-21-08, unaddressed property, northeast corner of Sunset Bay Road and Transmitter Road intersection. At this time, I would ask Councillor Poirier to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for the many blessings we enjoy in the city of Kenora. As we gather, we recognize that we are in Treaty 3 lands, which are steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nation and Métis people today. We continue to be thankful for the partnerships with our Indigenous people. Give us wisdom in our minds, clearness in our thinking, truth in our speaking, and always love in our hearts, so that we may try always to unite the citizens of Kenora. Be with us today and guide us in our decision making. Amen.
I might have to reset up again.
Yeah, I'll hold.
Okay, so I can just go.
Yeah, just.
The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant and our city planner, members of council will be afforded an opportunity to speak, and at that time, the meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. The public is encouraged to have read the city planner's planning report in advance of the public meeting, which may clarify questions in advance of the public meeting. Interested persons are requested to give their name, address for the recording of the minutes. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and on the forms provided at the meeting are collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the office of the city clerk. Notice was given by publishing in the Daily Mire News, which in the opinion of the clerk of the city of Kenora is of sufficiently general circulation in the area to which the proposed bylaw amendment would apply, and that it would give the public reasonable notice of the public meeting. Notice was also provided by mail to every owner of property within 120 meters of the subject property, prescribed persons and public bodies, and posted online in the City of Kenora portal. An appeal may be made to the Ontario Land Tribunal not later than 20 days after the day that the giving of notice, as required by Section 34-18, is completed by either the applicant or person or public body who, before the bylaw is passed, makes oral submissions at a public meeting or written submissions to the council, and may not be added as a party unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. A notice of appeal can be filed with the city clerk with the tribunal's required fee. An appeal may only be made on the basis that the bylaw is inconsistent with a policy statement issued under subsection 3.1, fails to conform with or conflicts with a provincial plan, or fails to conform to an applicable official plan. No decisions are made at this public meeting concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. The Council of the City of Kenora will have the opportunity to consider a decision at a future meeting of Council. Herein, the applicant will have the opportunity to speak on behalf of their application, and the city planner will provide a summation of the report and recommendation, after which anyone who wishes to speak, either for or against the application, will be given the opportunity to do so, and a record will be kept of all comments. If anyone wishes to receive the notice of decision of council, please leave your name and address with the city planner. At this time, I'd ask council if any member wishes to declare a pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof, either on today's agenda or from a previous meeting, or from a meeting in which a member was not in attendance. Seeing none. At this time, we would ask the applicant or the representative to present their planning application.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hopefully I'm share my screen. I don't know, members of council can see the slide you prepared to help kind of guide the discussions.
Yeah, we can see it, Ryan.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So this is an application for zoning bylaw amendment for a property on the Transmitter Road as part of a recently approved subdivision at the Planning Advisory Committee meeting in October. So the surrounding context is that the Trans-Canada Highway, Highway 17, is located approximately 200 meters to the west of the subject lands. For those of you familiar with the area, right across the road from the Lakeside Baptist Church. And the subject property is on the eastern edge of the city settlement boundary in an area with relatively small waterfront lots, all less than 0.5 hectares. The lot is, again, within the established area, within the settlement area. The lot is currently vacant, with approximately 2/3 of it cleared, and the remaining northern 1/3 is forested. There are existing municipal water and wastewater services along both Transmitter Road and Sunset Bay Road to service these properties. And there's an existing hydro line that runs along Transmitter Road, a small strip of city-owned property separating the lot from the Transmitter Road. Here's just some images of the subject property, both looking to the west towards the neighboring lot from the highest point, and then again from that same point looking towards the east, northeast, towards forested strip of land and down towards. So the proposal, there again, there's a 5-lot subdivision. The proposal is to rezone the 4 westernmost lots. The lot 5 will remain zoned R1. The purpose of the rezoning is to allow for semi-detached dwellings on lot 1, 2, and lot 3 and 4. This will maintain the existing official plan designation of established area. All of the lot dimensions meet or exceed the minimum requirements for residential zone R2, which are also the same as the minimum requirements for zone 1. And this proposal will contribute to the range of mix of housing available to current and future residents. So just to summarize in this image, is the yellow portion here that's being requested for rezoning, and lot 5 will remain zoned as R1. The separate lots will have a shared entrance from Transmitter Road, while the retained lot will have a separate entrance also from Transmitter Road. So if you can see in this image here, hopefully you can see my cursor there. This right here will be the access from Transmitter Road for all of the semi-detached buildings, and so they will all access from this one joint access and then separate from there for their separate private. The proposed development results in a density of 8.6 units per hectare, which is well below the city's definition of low density residential units per hectare. The increase in units on vacant lands results in a more efficient use of lands and resources within the city and meets the goals of the provincial policy statement in the City of Kenora official. And as you can see here, the lot size all significantly exceed, I think, anywhere from 25% to almost more than double the minimum lot size for R2. The frontages are all exceeded. Front yards all exceeded, interiors similarly, and so basically all of the minimum requirements are all met or exceeded for lot for owning of R2. And here are some development renderings of what the developer is proposing for these lots. On the top left side, you can see a street side view of the proposed semi-detached dwellings. And then on the right, you can see the proposed single detached dwelling, which would be proposed for the lot that remain R1. So the R2 zoning is to permit the semi-detached dwelling on the whole. So here's an area plan which outlines where the proposed buildings are going to be located. I think it's noteworthy here. I think privacy has come up as a potential area of concern, and I think this area plan really demonstrates that these new proposed buildings do not infringe on any adjacent privacy or they all have buildings and neighboring properties that are much closer to them than the new developments would result in. And in fact, some of the homes are actually further away from the proposed new buildings than the Lakeside Baptist Church is, which is across the Trans River Road and the park. This just gives you a context for the proposed development and its view of the relationship with existing buildings in the adjacent suburb. And there's also intention to preserve a significant portion of the forested area. So you can see here, this existing forested area is pretty much split, maybe in approximately half. This dotted line here is the current tree line, or edge of the forested area. So these trees are intended to be cut back to make room for the proposed development. With the trees to be remaining along this edge here, providing a buffer. And as you can see, the significant portion of the forested area is on the neighboring property owner for them to, maintain as they see fit. And so similarly, this is just an aerial image of that forested area, which provides additional privacy and noise buffer and privacy for the adjacent property owners. And again, there will be some removal on the southern portion here with the intent of the developer to retain a significant portion of the forested land with, as you go further north here, you're actually into the neighboring property. So that the policy framework for this proposed rezoning, the provincial policy statement emphasizes the importance of growth within existing settlement areas. Development should have a compact form, a mix of uses and density that allow the efficient use of land, infrastructure, and public service facilities. This should accommodate a range of housing options, and it should be transit supportive and promote active transportation. We feel this proposed development meets all of those tests. In the City of Kenora official plan, lands within the settlement area boundary are designated for residential development. Development should be promoted that can connect to municipal services. And this development is located 2.5 kilometers from downtown Kenora, the rec center, and other service amenities and businesses, thereby promoting active transportation. And here's just another look at the active transportation. As you can see, where Transmitter Road meets Highway 17, there is a sidewalk that extends into the city, and there is a bike lane as well that you can see designated both with the paint along the road and the sign on outside there with the existing bike lane. And the speed limit here along this section of highway is 50 kilometers an hour. To supplement or address some of the comments that we received by some neighboring property owners, the developer took it upon themselves to contact an engineer to do a traffic review which really supported what the city staff had already found is that there are no real concerns with increased traffic. The capacity of 2-lane local streets is approximately 1,000 vehicles per day. This development will result in an increase of up to 4 vehicles per hour at peak times, with total trips of approximately 38 per day. And you can see you're looking at 1,000 vehicles per day being the capacity, and total trips for this proposed development being under 40. The result is, and this is right from this traffic review, the traffic volume after the proposed development fall within the capacity of the existing infrastructure in the area, and the traffic generated from the proposed residential development will not materially affect the operations of the road network. So again, this is just additional information supporting what city staff already found regarding potential impacts to traffic of the proposed development. So one of the items that has come up with this proposed development was a past OMB ruling, over 20 years old. And I guess like to remind council that any planning board will rule based on the current planning context of which the provincial policy statement and the city of Kenora official plan are key documents that guide any OMB ruling, and there have been significant changes since in the last 20 years to the provincial policy statement direction, and probably most notably in 2005 with the real shift towards intensification and really increasing development where there is existing municipal infrastructure, really looking at making better use of lands and reducing costs in the municipality. And it's also important to keep in mind that the Ontario Municipal Board does not operate with the doctrine of precedent, so any past rulings does not impact on their decision for any future or current proposal. And I think in terms of need, the City of Kenora in 2018 had a State of the Housing report that they commissioned. It really did identify a lack of diversified housing options. The report concluded that the City of Kenora should focus on developing vacant lands within the city's established area as the first step towards closing Kenora's housing gap. And we were able to access data really good from CMHC and really found that this hasn't really been addressed. And we had CMHC has housing construction data, relatively current. We were able to access data right up till June of this year, June of 2021. And we found that of the 126 new units constructed in Kenora over the last 5 years, 105 of them were single detached dwellings. So to really give an idea and provide some context, we were able to access both data across the country and across Ontario. And you can see here that, in Ontario, across Canada, less than 1/3 of the new construction developments in the last 5 years were single detached. Ontario was about 1/3. Kenora is over 4 out of every 5 construction completions are single detached. And I think this really highlights, some of the issues that Kenora's had with the housing shortage and any affordable housing or providing different housing options. And I think while these semi-detached buildings obviously aren't going to of their own solve the some of the housing issues that the city's facing, but I think it's a step in the right direction, right? I think anything that starts to move away from single detached towards more semi-detached development will help provide more diversified housing options for the city. So in summary, a zoning bylaw amendment is being proposed to rezone the subject property from R1 to R2. This proposal complies with the provincial policy statement and the City of Kenora official plan. The proposed zoning is in keeping with the surrounding land uses. This proposal is transit supportive and can promote active transportation due to proximity to local businesses, services, and amenities. It utilizes existing municipal services and does not require any expansion of current services, and it would aid the city in diversifying housing. So thank you very much for your time. And any any questions, or maybe I'll turn it over to Kevin.
All right, thank you, Ryan. At this time, I would ask City Planner Kevin Sumner to describe the details of the planning application.
Yes, so I don't have a nice PowerPoint to follow along, but I invite you to read along with my report, which I'll be reading from. So the application here has been received to change the zoning of the portion of the subject property from R1 residential first density zone to R2 residential second density zone to allow the future development of those 4 proposed lots as Mr. Haynes has presented. A concurrent application for subdivision has already been approved by the Planning Advisory Committee with conditions to create those 4 new lots on the property. The proposed zoning amendment would allow for those 4 new lots to be developed with 2-unit semi-detached dwellings, as illustrated in the site plan submitted by the applicant. So the subject property is approximately 5,820 square meter lot located on the south shore of Lawrenson Lake on the northeast corner of the intersection of Transmitter Road and Sunset Bay Road. It remains undeveloped despite having been created as a lot more than 40 years ago and being zoned for residential development. Approximately 2/3 of the property has been cleared, with a stand of trees remaining on the northern third, as you saw in the illustration from Mr. Haynes. The high point of the lot is located at the corner of Sunset Bay Road and Transmitter Road at the southwest corner, with a steady slope from there to the shoreline reserve along the lake shore. The area of Lawrenson Lake in front of this property appears to be a marsh, but has not been formally identified as part of the Lawrenson Lake/Creek wetland complex, which is a provincially significant wetland. Neighboring properties on Sunset Bay Road range in size from approximately 2,200 to 3,850 square meters in area and have been developed with single detached homes. A church and unserviced rural residential lots are located on the other side of Transmitter Road nearby. In terms of consistency with legislative policy and city directives, the provincial policy statement has a number of applicable policies. This application is consistent with the policies, I believe, including policy 1.1.3.1, which states that settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development. Policy 1132 states that land use patterns within settlement areas shall be based on densities and a mix of land uses which efficiently use land and resources and are appropriate for and efficiently use the infrastructure and public service facilities which are planned or available, and avoid the need for their unjustified and/or uneconomical expansion, amongst other criteria. This policy further states that land use patterns within settlement areas shall also be based on a range of uses and opportunities for intensification and redevelopment in accordance with criteria in policy 1133, where this can be accommodated. That policy 1133 states that planning authorities shall identify appropriate locations and promote opportunities for transit supportive development, accommodating a significant supply and range of housing options through intensification and redevelopment, where this can be accommodated, taking into account existing building stock or areas and the availability of suitable existing or planned infrastructure and public service facilities required to accommodate projects. Policy 1136 states that new development taking place in designated growth areas, such as areas designated and available for residential development in Kenora's settlement area, should occur adjacent to existing built-up areas and should have a compact form, mix of use and densities that allow for the efficient use of land, infrastructure, and public service facilities. Policy 143 finally states that planning authorities shall provide for an appropriate range and mix of housing options and densities to meet projected market-based and affordable housing needs of current and future residents of the regional market by 1, permitting and facilitating all housing options required to meet the social, health, economic, and well-being requirements of current and future residents, including special needs requirements and needs arising from demographic changes and employment opportunities, and all types of residential intensification, including additional residential units and redevelopment in accordance with the aforementioned policies. Directing the development of new housing towards locations where appropriate levels of infrastructure and public service facilities are located or will be available to support current and projected needs. And finally, promoting densities for new housing which efficiently use land, resources, infrastructure, and public service facilities, and support the use of active transportation and transit in areas where it exists or is to be developed. In terms of the city's official plan, the land use designation is established area. The property is located within the boundaries of the city's designated settlement area, which is the built-up urban area of the municipality where development is concentrated and which has a mix of land uses. Policy 412C of the official plan states that residential development shall be encouraged in the established area through plans of subdivision, condominium, and consent as infilling or redevelopment of existing uses and full municipal services. Medium density residential use shall be supported provided that the development is in keeping with the character of the area. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the property is currently zoned R1, or residential first density. This zone allows for development of single detached housing and other compatible uses. The R1 zone does not permit the development of semi-detached housing that the applicant is proposing for the 4 western lots. And therefore the proposed R2 residential second density zone is proposed, which allows for that development of semi-detached housing. Minimum lot area and frontage requirements, as noted by Mr. Haynes in the R2 zone, are the same as those in the R1 zone, or 450 square meters of lot area and 15 meters of frontage for each lot. In terms of interdepartmental agency circulation, there was no comment from several of the agencies, so I'll just focus on those that did provide comment. The engineering department noted that servicing will be unique as it has to come off the flank instead of the frontage, with each dwelling requiring its own service to the city mains. Roads department noted that groundwater drainage will need to be established in the ditch line along Transmitter Road, which will flow north towards Lawrence Lake. Entrance permits required prior to development, and they did note that hydro lines seem quite low on the property adjacent to Transmitter Road. Water and wastewater division noticed the proposed water and wastewater servicing requires easements so that each house is serviced individually and the owner is responsible from the property line to the respective residences for both services. The sewers are only accessible on Sunset Bay Road, and the preferred water main connection is also there as well. They suggest access by municipally owned laneway, which would contain the water and sewage supply and collection mains that are a minimum of 150 millimeters in diameter, and the sizing is dependent on the engineering department's preferred design standards. In terms of public comments, notice was given in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act. This was a bit unique, this application, in that a new notice of the statutory public meeting was mailed out and published as a result of a rescheduling of the meetings. The Planning Advisory Committee open house was rescheduled from their September meeting to their October meeting, and therefore we had to reschedule the council public meeting, this one, from November to December to accommodate that. The minutes and relevant resolution from the Planning Advisory Committee meeting were provided to council as attachments. As of the date of the report, and since 10 letters have been received from members of the public expressing opposition to the proposed zoning amendment, 3 individuals or couples have each submitted 2 letters. 1 individual submitted a letter of their own and co-signed a second letter. 1 letter has a subject line indicating the associated subdivision, which was D10-21-12, but was included in the council package because it was received after the subdivision was approved and appears directed at this application, so we erred on the side of caution there. Some letters of opposition do make note of the municipal board order from March of 2000, which overturned a consent application that would have created a new lot from a neighboring property that was approved in 1999. Other concerns mentioned in the letters include that new dwellings would overlook neighboring lots, resulting in a lack of privacy. That the new lots would be out of character with neighboring properties due to the smaller size, lack of frontage on or orientation towards the lake, and allowing for a different demographic in the neighborhood. Safety concerns regarding driveways onto Transmitter Road, increasing traffic on Transmitter Road, site plan submitted by the developer as preliminary and inaccurately identified 2 dwellings on an adjacent property. That there's a potential for impact on Lawrence and Lake, and concerns about the impact of development on neighboring property values, as well as a frustration with the processing of the application and the associated subdivision application. So in terms of my evaluation as planner for the city of Kenora, I feel that amending of the zoning from R1 to R2 will allow the developer to develop semi-detached dwellings on the 4 lots in question. The site plan submitted indicates the intention is to maintain the same density of 1 dwelling per lot as would be required under the current R1 zoning, though the R2 zoning does permit two dwelling units per lot and other uses not permitted in the R1 zone. Both the provincial policy statement and the official plan, I feel, are supportive of the type of residential intensification that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment would support, making more efficient use of the lot within the designated settlement area that is readily accessed to existing municipal sewer and water services. The rezoning of the property from R1 to R2 is not anticipated to exacerbate any of the nuisance factors identified by the neighboring residents. The property is no higher than the adjacent property on the opposite side of Sunset Bay Road, and large portions of the northern property line are buffered by a stand of mature trees, which, as you've heard, the applicant intends to retain. The nearest residence is approximately 50 meters from the site of the westernmost of the proposed new dwellings, offering significant space for additional privacy measures, and the Roads Department has noted no concerns with the creation of new driveways onto Transmitter Road. The proposed lots are being rezoned, do not have frontage on Lawrence and Lake, and we have identified no grounds or concerns regarding any impact on the lake. That concludes my reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. At this point, any person may express his or her views of the amendment, and a record will be kept of all comments. Kevin alluded to in his a number of letters were received, and they form part of the official document that was been provided to council. In addition, a number of residents have directly sent letters to council on this issue. So when we get to it, I would ask, you don't need to read verbatim the letters previously presented, but I would certainly encourage you to highlight the points that you think are pertinent to this. So to start with, is there any member of public who wishes to speak in favor of the amendment? And because not everybody's got their screen on, if you either indicate by raising your hand or letting me know verbally, and then we'll go through there. So again, is there any member of public who wishes to speak in favor of the amendment? So seeing none. Is there any member of public who wishes to speak in opposition of the amendment? So we will start with, I'm going to go through the list, but Rod, you will go first. Teresa, are you going to speak? No? Okay.
Yes, she's saying.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Is Pat Suchuk on, and is she going to speak? Or Rod, is that going through you?
It'll be through me.
Okay. I have Joni at the law office, so I'm assuming that's you, Rod, that Joni set up this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Ken Ames?
Yes, I'd like to speak.
Okay. And Ms. Tracy Wider?
Yes, I would like to speak.
Okay. And that's everybody on my list. I don't see anybody else on the screen. I believe Gloria is with the next one. So, Mr. Suchuk, could I invite you to go first, please?
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. My name is Rod Suchuk. I'm from Box 2440, Kenora, Ontario, P9N 3X8. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to present our objection to the zoning from R1 to R2. We are strongly opposed to this application by Ayrie's development. The developer that I'm sure the city is aware, given the 8-unit condo opposite the mill site. This developer intends to amend the zoning bylaw to allow 5 family units to reside on Part 7, Plan 23R 4505, and the subdivision application to sever Part 7 into 5 separate lots. Presently, only one family unit is allowed, as is the case with the remaining 5 owners, of which I am one. My wife Pat and I had a residence on Mintu Avenue and a cottage on Root Bay, on the Lake of the Woods. And we had an opportunity to purchase Part 4, which is the property that I'm presently residing. Lawrenson Lake was, and still is, a beautiful lake within the city of Kenora. And the properties for sale were large, high-shaped lots widening at the lakefront. We sold our properties and built here approximately 42 years ago because we wanted to live in a low-density lake subdivision close to the center of the city and its amenities, but combined with the atmosphere of a cottage property and the greater privacy and rural setting that comes with it. If this was allowed to proceed, the overall effect would be ultimately to devalue our property. Should this application be allowed to move to higher density, there would be an additional environmental concern. We presently enjoy the presence of blue heron, ducks, loons, and other wildlife. Most of the property fronting on Lawrenson Lake is single-family zoning from Ayrie Street, which is near the jail, all the way across the lake to Zaneski Road, which is very close to the Guiding Odors and those places. So you can see it's pretty much 80-85% of the lake. And it's definitely over at least 3 miles. In 1999, one of our neighbors made an application to sever the property into 2 lots. It wasn't easy, but 3 of the 5 neighbors felt strongly enough about the issue that we appealed the Kenora Planning Board's decision to allow the severance. The OMB decision dated March 22nd, 2000, set out the reasons for allowing our appeal. The issues raised at that hearing are basically dealing with the same issues today. All 5 owners of the residences on the lake, our neighbors, are now all on board, and all 5 oppose changes in zoning and oppose the application for the subdivision from 1 lot to 5 lots. The original hearing for this subdivision was held on September the 19th, 2021. 3 planning board members were present, and after the hearing was over, the conclusion was that the motion to allow the subdivision was defeated, and minutes to that effect were circulated. Several days later, we were all received notice that the original decision was rescinded, and there would be a rehearing on October the 19th. We lost the vote 3-2 at that hearing, but questioned how a defeated application without a further planning board meeting was suddenly rescinded. All 5 owners are opposed to this planning board decision. The city and developer's planner cite several sections with respect to subdivision legislation. I respectfully submit the principles quoted by them apply to a larger tract of land, not the remaining lot on a 43-year-old settlement. 4 of the 5 families have lived in our settlement since the beginning, and the Michaelos joined us in 1996. A major principle is that the proposed lots should conform with the size, shape, and dimensions of the present lots. The 4 small rectangular lots to accommodate 2 side-by-side residential units does not show any resemblance of conformity to the shape, size, and dimensions or orientation with the present lots. These planners would have our 5 owners subject to a further 5-lot subdivision on the one remaining lot housing 5 family units. There is no mention in any reports that additional use of the sewer and water by additional family units would be added. The planners also avoid allegations that the proposed entrances to the 2 side yard residences and the single-family residence are dangerous. The developer proposes 2 entrances to the east of Sunset Road. These entrances are obviously a danger to someone who is open to be objective and actually view the proposed entrances and drive over the road. These entrances are on a hill and very close to a dramatic turn in the road. This is a country road with no sidewalks or space to walk safely. It is not uncommon to observe excessive speed, large vehicles, and often heavy equipment barreling down the road. Our exit and entrance to west of those proposed accesses, and we are very careful when entering and exiting Transmitted Road. Please go and look for yourselves. I realize you don't have to go to the next project. I invite you to do so. In conclusion, why can't we keep the settlement in conformity rather than accept the hodgepodge? Why can't we keep and maintain what we bargained for when we built here? Please read or reread the OMB decision. We have discussed this matter as recent as yesterday with Mr. Schneezer, our planner in 2000. He agrees the OMB decision is 100% on point. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rod. At this time, I would invite Teresa Doran to speak, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, City Council and Mayor. Thank you, Rod. That was wonderful. You said everything I was thinking. I just wanted to point out that by changing it to R2 and allowing, even though they are minimum requirement size lots, I don't think they conform to the neighborhood at all. Like, they're very tiny if mine is small, right? I just feel it's important to mention that we're a unique subdivision in the city of Kenora, and I would hate to see my property devalue over all of these years. I trust in your decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Teresa. Next up, I invite Mr. Ken Ames to speak, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I do believe that the city of Kenora should be protecting its treasures. I can't emphasize that enough. The character and the area we have on Lawrence Lake. To me, it's unbelievable what the city is trying to do here. I don't even think, I mean, I have a very hard time believing the city has a future development for low-cost housing and low-cost rental housing when they're throwing this at us. It is just unbelievable. But anyhow, I never got any answers to any of the questions I asked, so I'm going to ask them again. I written down here that 2000 Pecuniary subdivision application, and it was totally denied, and the reason was non-conformity. This is blatantly non-conformity, what you're throwing at us here. Total ridiculous. So, anyways, you keep throwing at us that you got 4 lots or 5 lots, and I'm reading from the pictures that the city keeps sending me. Only the first picture ever showed the whole lot, and again we're showing, are we building 5? I mean, the planner or the salesman we had said he's only going to be putting 4 zoning lots, referred to as R2, one maintained as R1. But that's not what the city keeps putting out. Decision of the Planning Advisory Committee, and I'll read it, line 4, number 42168-0592, and the creation of 4 new lots be approved. What are we talking? And above that it says, item 3, purpose of application. The proposed plan of the subdivision is to divide ownership into 5 lots as zoned R2, residential secondary. So now we have 2 things happening here. No answers. The gentleman who took the picture, I'm sorry, from Ayrie's Construction, I don't know your name and I apologize. But that was a great picture you took looking west from the transmitter road, and it's like every other picture we get shows only 1. If you would have turned east and taken a picture, you would see a total nightmare of an intersection. You take your life in your hands every time you cross that road because it is a blind corner. We just had an accident, I'm going to say 3 days ago. Somebody hit the post there because they tried to beat traffic coming around that corner. And yes, it is a 50 kilometer zone. It changes on the corner to 50, so what do you, most people don't start slowing down until they get up by the jail. It is unbelievable. Anyways, I'm going to get to my statements. Non-conformity is how I've labeled this, and I invite you all to have a drive around Kenora and just tell me how many blocks in Kenora. I mean, if I leave downtown Kenora and I drive down Park Street, that is all R2 condominiums, or I shouldn't say they are apartment blocks, all the way to 8th Street, all apartment blocks. But as soon as I get past 8th Street, we have all R2 housing. I should say R1 housing. So, anywhere around Kenora, we have up in the Heenan Place area, that's all apartment blocks. So how is it all of a sudden we are going to have this? Because nowhere can I find in the Ontario Planning Act, on the Ontario Building Code, that this is allowed. Not one, no lot can be any smaller than the adjacent lots in the same block, in the same zoning area. So every lot has to be 1 acre. I don't know where you get the information to change it. That's how I read it. And the other thing I think is this building that they're proposing, it has no exceptional architectural or any landscaping. In fact, I've asked many times about what's going on with the landscaping, and I'm told that's left to later. Isn't that funny? That's like letting your house burn down and running out to buy fire insurance. I think this is ludicrous. Anyways, here's what I think it does do. It creates more congestion. The transmitter road entrance from Highway 17 is a nightmare, already very poor at sight lines. The 2 roads meet at over 130-degree angle. The transmitter road is itself a poor road, barely 2 lanes wide. The city has to look at its extra costs, rebuilding the first kilometer of the road, installation of sewer and water services for the 6 new units, stop lights at the intersection, and rebuild the intersection with turning lanes so people can get in and out safely. Yes, conformity with official plan. I haven't seen an official plan, and nobody has sent me an official plan. And like Mr. Suchak, I received that. I was purposely asked what happened at the meeting, and I was told at the meeting that the bylaw was defeated, and I received paperwork stating the same, and then all of a sudden here we are. What, they don't get your right answer, so you do it 2 or 3 times? Unbelievable. And by the grapevine, I hear there's more development going on in this area, and I don't hear anything from the city about that either. So I do think the city should be looking at it, because it can't be putting more giant apartment blocks up for the same reason. R1 is R1, and you have to keep privacy totally on top, #1 priority. The buildings cannot be any higher than the existing buildings in the first few buildings, and then they can progressively get higher, but not right up against an R1. Are we going to have a 10-story, or the same as on Park Street, 6-story building? Rezoning doesn't solve anything, and again, the Ontario Building was quite clear, no lot in a new zone can be any smaller than the adjacent lots in the same block in the same zoning district. The developer has stated they are not building anything that the city wants. No low-cost housing, no low-cost rental housing. Again, so why is the city pushing this? Is the government going to fill your pockets with cash? Doesn't make any sense for this to proceed. And number two, I don't understand, is the city bylaw, or is the city passing on the fact that the developer wants to run his own sewer and water lines into these developments? So are they gonna get a break on the frontage costs? I was thinking it's around $250 a linear foot to service a lot. So to me, that's, well, anyways, you do the math. I don't know the numbers on the property lines. Is it 60 feet or per lot or what it is? You guys have it? To sum it up, I'm going to just say the sum up on the non-conforming in 2000, here we are in 2021, you're beating the same Bush guys. There's history here. It didn't fly then, why should it fly now? You haven't given me anything that says other than a bunch of numbers stating that the city needs it. So I'm going to read you what I sent you already about all of the town of Kenora. Kenora has a very distinct treasures, some in plain sight, and others no.
Mr.
Kenora
Ames?
City Hall, Kenora Public Library.
Mr. Ames, sir, I indicated at the start, that if we've previously received your letter, you don't need to, we don't need to read it verbatim again, please.
I totally hear you, but you said you did say if there was something specifically I wanted to, I could say that. So that's why this is something specifically I wanted to address.
Okay.
That's why I did you say. I'm only going to read these 6 lines.
Okay, that's fine. And then, thank you, sir.
And the history of Kenora is 1996, we had 22,399 people, and on the census done in 2016, we only have 15,300 people, for a loss of 7,000 people, or 1,700 4-person families. So I don't understand where we need this housing at all. The buildings, we all know how many hotels are gone from Kenora, and those are all, I'm going to say all, low-cost rental units, and the city has not done anything for years and years and years about it, and all of a sudden we're going to jump all over this? Doesn't make any sense. Anyways, sum up, I think the situation is here, one building lot, one building. Simple as that. Thank you very much, Council and Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ames. At this time, I'd invite Tracy Wider to speak, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for hearing our concerns regarding this subdivision. I think that Mr. Suchak has brought many of the points that we're concerned about as the 5 group owners of this property, so I'm not going to elaborate on that. And Mr. Ames did touch on the population aspect of, it seems that we're creating more housing for people that really aren't here. And then as well, I'd like to address the fact that Teresa Doran has mentioned that she's quite concerned about privacy and her belongings. And having worked with the city and lived in other cities all over the world and having lots of experience with tourism, and then as well addressing the fact that our economy is really poor right now, and because of that there are a lot of need for low-income housing. One of the things that our group always looked forward to is the fact 40 years ago that these would be our homes and they would be legacy homes and that they would be built with the idea that they would belong to our children. And indeed that has happened in my family's case. And as recently as this spring, I also looked at, once again, building on my parents' property to include more of my family. And it seemed as though it wouldn't fly. And so now you're going to let the subdivision come through on the spec of a Ontario planner down in southern Ontario that has high density population matters. And I'm just going to be blatantly right out there. I'm not interested in having low income housing in my estate setting. And I've traveled through the city and watched all of how it's difficult for our bylaw department to keep up with the degradation and the abusiveness of low-income housing people because they're transient. And I don't want transient living in my neighborhood. That's it, that's all. And I don't think anybody else does either. And we've worked very hard to keep our little section of Kenora up to snuff with what we want to project as a city, which I think is a class of people that will be attracting to doctors, to lawyers, and to professionals that will work within our community. That's why we have single housing dwelling being the predominant building aspect, is because people that are desirable want to have single residential housing development. And I think that, as I've said before, the only reason why this property hasn't sold in the past was because it was always priced at $150,000. And 40 years ago, that was too much. Now, it's a good piece of property, and I think that it will sell. And I think that it doesn't need to be subdivided. And I would hope that you will look at it as being one of the rare advantages of living in Kenora. Thank you very much for hearing our presentation, and I encourage you to read all of the letters if you haven't, because there are some excellent invitations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. At this time, members of council, do you have any discussion or questions? Councillor Smith, please.
So just for clarity and analysis of our Development Services Director or the planner, the severance has already been approved, correct? So what could potentially happen here with the 4 subdivided lots is now with the R1, you could have a single residence on each of those lots, totaling 4 houses in all, right?
That is true, yes.
Thank you.
Is there any other member, Councillor Chase?
One of the questions, I mean, one of the concerns that's come about was the rehearing of this file at PAC. So maybe I'll direct this question to Adam, but could you explain why the rehearing took place from the city's perspective? What happened at that PAC meeting? There was the claim made by Mr. Shuchuk that the motion was defeated. Is that in fact true? What could you maybe provide a bit of context as to what happened in that first PAC meeting and why we are rehearing this?
Yeah, so, and I think it's important to draw the distinction between the file before council being the rezoning and then the plan of subdivision, which PAC has the approval authority over. So the plan of subdivision, that was the subject of the rehearing, to which with the members of PAC in attendance, there was no seconder. So upon solicitor review, technically a vote did not take place, to which it was their opinion that that we do have a rehearing because technically there was no decision to be made, and it would be only fair to have it heard again. So that was for the plan of subdivision, but at that same meeting that based on the applicant suggesting that the rezoning be deferred for another month, we are now in kind of this situation or we're now hearing the rezoning a little bit later than we otherwise previously would have. So in terms of plan of subdivision, that was the basis for the rehearing, was just the procedure in which that wasn't followed, and that from legal opinion it needed to be reheard.
So just to confirm, the motion went to the floor. There was no seconder, so it couldn't be moved either way. So
yeah, it was not moved, and there was no vote.
To provide a little bit more context around that, as I understand it, we had quorum, which is the bare minimum number of people around the PAC table that we can have to hear the decision. And so while we have terms of reference for the Planning Advisory Committee, and we do our best to follow those procedures, sometimes an odd situation like that arises. And so with only 3 people around the table, there was some confusion around seconding. And it's just one of those things that happens, which is why we decided to get legal opinion and make sure that we made the right decision whether or not to move forward with a rehearing or not move forward with a rehearing, and we did that based off of legal advice.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Anyone else? So my question then, Adam, would be, regardless of the decision of the PAC, whether the zoning was recommended or defeated, the process dictates that this meeting still has to be held and council still has to make the final decision. Is that not correct?
Yes, so the zoning bylaw amendments, PAC really serves as being kind of having that, the body to hold a public open house on the matter, to which they provide a recommendation to council. And that's solely just for zoning bylaw amendments. They don't have approval authority versus plans of subdivision, to which they are the approval authority. So that plan of subdivision has been already approved by our planning advisory committee, and this rezoning is now the subject of council approval.
Which we had to have regardless of what PAC had recommended?
Yes.
Or-
Yeah.
Thanks. Anyone else? All right.
Oh, may I ask one
Councillor,
further question?
yes, Councillor Chase.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the members of the public who was speaking against the development made reference to low-income housing. I mean, is what's being proposed subsidized or government-run, or is there maybe some confusion here that this is actually market housing? Could you maybe elaborate on what is specifically being proposed to be developed here?
Yeah, no, it is based on, I think, information provided by the developer. This wouldn't by, I think, any measure equate to being low-income housing. And no, I think they have provided some supplemental information around pricing and whatnot. I don't, whether it's even affordability-wise, it's very much more on the market end.
To be clear, we don't zone people, we zone uses as a single, so as single or detached dwellings. We do not regulate who inhabits that, so we would not get into a discussion or provide any assurances as to the income level of the future residents of those dwellings.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, and just to provide clarity around my first comment about the single dwellings on all 4 lots. The severance has been passed, so if the zoning is not approved by council for an R2 to allow for the duplexes, it'll stay R1, and the developer can then build 4 single houses on those lots anyways. So the development can occur one way or the other, regardless of the council vote. So that was the point that I was trying to make.
And I think so we don't get into, that's part of the debate for the council meeting and the rationale for whatever decisions are made at that time. All right? All right, so at this time then, get to my agenda. There are no further questions or comments. The meeting is now declared closed. I want to thank...
Can I interrupt, Mayor? My name is Ken Ames, and I just had one question, and I voted, and I never got an answer to that either. And while we're still here, the question is, the meeting on August 23rd, 2021, I don't ever recall getting any information about it even approving this plan. So I would like to know how that happened. And that was in literature that I've received from the city.
I believe that may be a reference to a notice date. There was no meeting in August. There was the September meeting of PAC, Planning Advisory Committee, and then it came back, as we heard, to the October meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee. There was no meeting held in August.
It says that the property already has been approved for splitting, and that it was final decision was made on August 23rd, 2021. That is in writing in the information sent to me by the city. And I never received anything about that planning going on, period.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of the reference to an August.
Mr. Ames, who sent you that letter? Who sent you the letter?
The city of Kenora.
But normally somebody signs it.
Sorry to interrupt, Your Worship.
Mr. Ames, just give us 1 second. We're going to find that.
I believe the date he's referring to is August 23rd here, that the application for the amendment was completed.
Oh.
So that's when that's the date the applicant submitted things to the planning department.
Okay.
I don't think that was an actual meeting, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, that sounds correct, so, sorry, yeah, it was deemed.
And I can read it, so it says, "Be advised that the Corporation of the City of Kenora considered the application for the amendment to the zoning bylaw to be complete on October 23rd. So that's simply the applicant has made the application, and the application was deemed complete on that date.
Okay. So there was no meeting on that date? The only meetings, there were no meetings then, okay? All right.
Yeah, I didn't say that it was a meeting, I said on August 23rd, everything had to be submitted for, and that would be approved on that date. I didn't say there was a meeting.
All right. I will now declare this portion of the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Do we go right in, or can we take a 2-minute break?
You can just announce you're taking a 2-minute break.
Okay, we're going to take a couple-minute break here before we go into the next planning meeting.
This one will. Yes. No, they're not.
Mike's alive.
Yeah, mine's live right now until we're done this public meeting. So, no, not my phone speaker.
Stacy, we don't have insurance for that.
council, mics are on. Work, Sharon?
How about now, Melissa?
Thanks. Thanks, Mary.
No? Melissa, can you hear us? No.
I'm sorry.
I thought I was gonna make it through. Let me see now. She can hear us. Or no, we can hear her, but she can't hear us.
Can anybody hear us? Like, Gloria, can you hear us?
Melissa, can you hear us?
Gloria, can you hear me? No.
This is what happened last time, so reset it. Melissa, you still can't hear us?
You've got mute on there.
What about this unmute button at the bottom here?
No, so it all goes through the mics on your desks. Melissa, can you mute yourself? So she's super loud. I'm gonna mute her. There.
The best laid plans of mice and men.
I'm getting anxious. I got staff, one green staff at the store. I'm gonna stay.
I'm just trying to think what else I can do here to reset this. I
Nate's
started
away.
it, I know what I have to do. Leave meeting, cancel, restart this computer. Update and restart, great. I'm just gonna restart, yeah.
Should let her know.
Dan, can you just turn off, or can you unmute yourself and just let Melissa know in the meeting that we're gonna restart this room? Because Dan's still
Will everybody
connected.
hear me then?
Yep.
So we're experiencing technical difficulties. We will be right back.
You put the test pattern up?
This is connected, this is connected.
I don't think they're allowed to use it anymore, did you? Used to have a,
Oh, right.
Still plugged in.
I grew up with a lot of that.
I came in this morning at 6 o'clock to make sure this was all working. A2TAY. Can we just go back to normal time so we don't have all this?
No, this is, yeah, he is.
Okay, let's try this now. Meetings. Join. Launch. Join. Melissa, are you there? Melissa, can you hear me? No. Well, she is muted, but she would respond to me if she could hear me. Melissa, can you hear me?
I think the whole system. What happened? I heard it.
The power, the hose.
Oh, it wasn't physically you that fell on the floor?
No, I think it took. I'm a little more agile than that. Thanks for your concern, the way you ran across the room.
Melissa, can you hear me?
And he asked you 10 minutes later, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Melissa, can you hear me? No. Microphone. Melissa, can you hear me?
Do you still have a boat?
Melissa, can you hear me? Hello? Melissa? Melissa? make sure she's actually listening to us and she doesn't have us muted. I just want her to like it out there. Can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Can you tell if it's?
Yeah, you're good.
Good afternoon, everyone. Call the public meeting to order to discuss an application for temporary use bylaw, unaddressed property, Lot 1, Plan 23M966, Bells Point Road, PIN 42134-0552. At this time, I invite Councillor Corey to read the Land Acknowledgement.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for the many blessings we enjoy in the city of Kenora. As we gather, we recognize that we are on Treaty 3 lands, which are steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nation and Métis people today. We continue to be thankful for the partnerships with our Indigenous people. Give us wisdom in our minds, clearness in our thinking, truth in our speaking, and always love in our hearts, so that we may try always to unite the citizens of Kenora. Be with us today and guide us in our decision-making. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Pori. The purpose of this public meeting is to present a planning application in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant and our city planner, any members of council will be afforded an opportunity to speak, and at that time, the meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Public is encouraged to read the city planner's planning report in advance of the public meeting, which may clarify questions in advance of the public meeting. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and on the forms provided at the meeting are collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the city clerk. Notice was given by publishing in the Daily Miner News, which in the opinion of the clerk of the city of Kenora is of sufficiently general circulation in the area to which the proposed bylaw amendment would apply, and that would give the public reasonable notice of the public meeting. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. Public meeting is held to gather public opinion. Council of the City of Kenora will have the opportunity to consider a decision at a future meeting of council. Herein, the applicant will have the opportunity to speak on behalf of their application, and the city planner will provide a summation of the report and recommendation, after which anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the application will be given the opportunity to do so, and a record will be kept of all comments. If anyone wishes to receive the notice of decision of council, please leave your name and address with the city planner. At this time, I'd ask members of council if they wish to any declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof, either on today's agenda or from a previous meeting, or from a meeting in which a member was not in attendance. Seeing none, at this point in time, normally the applicant would give their presentation. We've received notice that the applicant will not be present at today's meeting. At this point then, I would invite City Planner Kevin Sumner to describe the details of the application.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So an application has been received requesting temporary use approval for the use of the subject property as a campground for a single camper for a period of up to 3 years in the BSL Black Sturgeon Lake Restricted Development Area Zone. While the use of a property in the BSL zone as a campground is not normally permitted, Section 39 of the Planning Act gives councils the right through a temporary use bylaw to authorize the temporary use of land, buildings, or structures for any purpose that is otherwise prohibited in the zoning bylaw. A temporary use may not be authorized for more than 3 years, but may be extended with a new application. In terms of existing conditions on the property, the subject property was created as part of a 23-lot subdivision in 2012. In 2014, the city approved a site plan control application for a dock at the southeast corner of the property and associated easements so that a portion of the property could be used for docking access and parking for owners of backshore lots in the development. Since that time, the City of Kenora has not received any permits or related applications for development on the property. As a result of a complaint from the public, the Development Services Department was made aware that campers were located on the property. An inspection of the property by a bylaw enforcement officer on July 26th confirmed this, and the property owners were contacted with a request to bring the property into compliance with the zoning bylaw. A review of aerial imagery from the city's GIS system revealed evidence that a trailer had been located on the property as far back as 2019, though that may be a different trailer and or in a different location than the one that is currently on the property. A follow-up inspection of the property was conducted by an officer on August 26th. This inspection documented 2 campers on the property and that an unpermitted shoreline dock had been constructed on the shoreline with adjacent landscaping work on the southwest corner of the property. Photos taken by the officer also revealed evidence of release of wastewater from the campers directly onto the property. A review of documents related to the original subdivision of the property revealed that there was an archaeological site on this lot. A Stage 3 archaeological assessment completed for the site in October 2011 determined that there is a culturally historic value to this site as it enhances the understanding of past human settlement. The assessment noted the fact that portions of the site at that time were still intact, allowing for the recovering of artifacts in situ, thus contributing to the greater archaeological knowledge of Northern Ontario. The recommendations submitted to the Ministry of Culture were: 1, that the recommended Stage 4 mitigation for the site is protection and avoidance. The site is subject to long-term protection as per 4.1.1 Ontario 2011, 68 to 69. The documented area of site DKKO 15, a 45 meter by 45 meter grid area, requires a protective buffer of 20 meters around woodland village sites. 2, a temporary barrier around the area to be avoided, and a no-go instruction to all on-site construction crews is required. The location to be avoided is to be drafted into all contract drawings with explicit instructions for avoiding the area. 3, the site could be further protected by an 8-foot chain link fence around the site, including the buffer area, until a point in time when or if the site is excavated by qualified archaeologists. 4, no tree removal, landscaping, gardening, road or trail development, or utilities installation can occur within the fenced area of Stage 3 investigation until the site is excavated by a qualified archaeologist. And 5, any transfer of property through sale or inheritance must have a clause in the transaction that provides documentation confirming awareness of obligations for the archaeological site and the owner's willingness and capacity to fulfill those obligations. So I include as figure 9 an illustration from the archaeological assessment showing the test grid and the 20-meter buffer that is referenced above. That mapping is a little bit different from the level of detail that we have in our GIS mapping, but you can infer the location there on the southwest corner. A fisheries assessment is also completed for the shoreline in this area and is attached to the report. The assessment concluded that shoreline development in this area would not adversely impact upon critical spawning habitat. And I provide a number of photographs of the site in my report that are provided by our law enforcement officer. So moving on to compliance with legislative policy and city directives. In terms of the provincial policy statement, the statement states that development that is compatible with the rural landscape and can be sustained by rural service levels should be promoted. But development and site alteration shall not be permitted on lands containing archaeological resources or areas of archaeological potential unless significant archaeological resources have been conserved. And planning authorities are not to permit development and site alteration on adjacent lands to protect heritage property, except where the proposed development and site alteration has been evaluated and it has been demonstrated that the heritage attributes of the protected heritage property will be conserved. In terms of the city's official plan, the land use designation of the property is rural area, and with permitted uses, a variety of permitted uses to be encouraged. Most of the property is also designated as Black Sturgeon Lake Restricted Development Area, Special Policy Overlay. Shoreline development is restricted to 25% of the lot frontage in this area, and this applies to, but is not limited to all structures, removal of vegetation, pathways, decks, and docks. The official plan requires that any alteration to known archaeological sites shall only be performed by licensed archaeologists as per Section 48 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The official plan stipulates that site plan control may be used for any development of Black Sturgeon Lake or any navigable waterway in the city in order to protect natural resource values, and this is reflected in the city's site plan control bylaw, and it is our practice to require site plan control on all shoreline properties in Black Sturgeon Lake. The official plan in guiding the implementation of the zoning bylaw allows that council may pass a bylaw to allow the temporary use of lands that do not comply with the land use designation of the plan, provided that A, the temporary use does not require major capital investment or alteration to the existing landscape, B, the proposed use is compatible with the surrounding land uses, C, the proposed use does not require extension of municipal services, D, the developer has entered into agreement with the municipality specifying the conditions under which that use may be permitted, and E, that the bylaw shall specify a maximum time period for which the use may be permitted. So in terms of the city's zoning bylaw number 101-2015, most of the property is zoned BSL 29, Black Sturgeon Lake Restricted Development Area Zone. This zone implements the Black Sturgeon Lake Restricted Development Area Special Overlay in the city's official plan. And that exception 29 is in place on all the properties associated with the original 23 lot subdivision to allow a reduced frontage on lot 5, which isn't the subject of this application. The southwestern point of the property is zoned EP, or Environmental Protection Zone. This zone provides protection to those areas which have historical or natural significance, such as First Nation burial grounds, fish and wildlife habitat. The only permitted use in the EP zone is wildlife conservation area, or reserve. The cutting, removal, or burning of trees and other vegetation is prohibited in the EP zone, as is the placement of removal of topsoil. The unpermitted shoreline structures, clearing of vegetation, and associated landscaping documented by bylaw enforcement are located in that EP zone. And in 2019, a trailer at that time was located in the EP area. It is not known if the trailers photographed by bylaw enforcement in this past summer are located in the EP area. Under the bylaw, campers, tents, and recreational vehicles are only permitted to be occupied in campsites on a campground, which is normally only permitted in the TR or tourist recreational zone. No other zoning use category permits the occupation of campers, tents, and recreational vehicles, even temporarily. Trailers may be parked or stored on a lot in any zone with an existing permitted use, but may not be occupied during storage. And therefore, this temporary use bylaw must be approved if the applicants wish to have even a single camper located on the property. So turning to interdepartmental and agency circulation, we had some comments when we circulated this, which I'll go through. The building department commented that allowing this use will set precedent for future requests. The 3-year time frame to decide when to build is a stretch, then add the period for the build. This could go on for years. Bylaw enforcement and the city clerk commented that there are concerns with granting a 3-year temporary use provision without actual plans in place to build a cabin or dwelling. The owners indicated they took possession of the property over a year ago and at this time do not yet have a plan to build. The application indicates they plan to develop in the near future with no proposed timeline. The camper is currently parked on the property and was occupied during the summer months in contravention of the bylaw. It has a more permanent ground level wooden deck structure installed, which suggests it was intended for the camper to be placed initially for longer term use. Bylaw enforcement and development services receive many reports each summer season to investigate and enforce similar situations in which vacant properties, mainly lakefront, that have been acquired and campers placed to be used as seasonal cottages or cabins with no sign of building activity. If a temporary use provision is permitted in this case, we can expect many more applications from property owners for the same permissions for a 3-year duration and beyond. I'm very concerned about the precedents this will set and long-term approval that will become permanent. If a temporary use provision is granted, it is suggested that this comes with conditions and a staged construction schedule, including a deadline for having a building permit issued, demonstrating progressions to ensure completion by the expiry of the temporary use provision. This would be consistent with temporary use provisions granted in the past by the city. It would be required that temporary use provisions issued are monitored and tracked, and that scheduled inspections occur at each deadline to ensure compliance. These timelines should be much shorter than 3 years, and in this particular case, they've already had 1 year or more. I am opposed to any temporary use permitting without active building plans in place. We've seen an increased presence of mobile trailers and long-term presence of these trailers with no intentions of building. I don't believe providing a temporary use permit for these locations will solve the increasing problem, but add to the perception that they will be permitted, especially in the long run. Fire and Emergency Services commented, no concerns from fire unless the applicants try to rig electrical and or heating systems for the winter. Main safety concerns would be such a system as most trailers are not designed for permanent residency and are not very forgiving in fires. I agree with the building comments, and there is more of a push on these people using trailers or tiny homes on these types of properties. Water and Wastewater Division noted that they will require a Northwestern Health Unit approved treatment system in place, which allows for a number of options such as holding tank, grey water pit, outhouse, etc. The Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Transportation and Culture Industries provided the comment that the important thing from the Archaeological assessment is map 8. If this is the property they are referring to in the application, these owners can't do anything to alter the land around their shoreline. The Ontario Heritage Act only brings charges on activities like site looting or disturbance when someone knowingly disturbs a site. The previous landowner should have informed the new buyers about the site. If the site has been disrupted by these activities, the next step would be for the property owners to hire a licensed professional archaeologist to assess the damage and provide recommendations for going forward from there. The Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry noted the impact of a single camper on this lot, providing waste is properly disposed of, are likely significantly less than the impact of developing it for a permanent dwelling. Those impacts would already have been considered by NDMNRFF during the planning of the subdivision. Therefore, there are no concerns. There are other properties on or near Black Sturgeon Lake with no primary dwelling that currently have people living in campers. This decision could set precedent for other residents requesting to live in campers. The biggest issue with this would likely be ensuring that wastewater was being properly disposed of. And finally, the Northwestern Health Unit noted that if the camper will be staying for any extended period of time, more than a week, a permitted sewage system would be required for the property. The onboard tanks aren't meant for a long-term solution. So notice of this application was given in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act. The Planning Advisory Committee considered this application at their meeting of October 19th. The committee voted not to recommend approval of the temporary use bylaw. The minutes and relevant resolution are attached with my report. And as of the date of the report, and since 9 written comments have been received from members of the public, these comments appear to be evenly split between letters of support, for, and opposition, which were also for, with one appearing to offer no clear preference, and the letters in total represent a range of opinions regarding the proposed temporary use and the general use of campers as residences in the area. Letters of support generally express approval for property owners to be able to inhabit trailers as a primary use on a property, especially where there are plans to eventually build a permanent dwelling. Letters of opposition generally note concerns in regards to activities on the property already documented in my report. Some are supportive of the idea of allowing regulated campers as a temporary use in advance of or during construction of a permanent dwelling, but are opposed to approval of this application for reasons specific to this property. Some of the letters, both supportive and opposed, point out that the applicants are not the only property owners in the area who are inhabiting campers on their properties. So in terms of my evaluation, it appears that since at least 2019, the subject property has been in use as a campground with associated clearing of vegetation, preparation of a camping site, unpermitted shoreline structures, landscaping, and on-site disposal of wastewater. These developments did not receive the necessary planning approvals, including site plan control approval for development of a property on the shoreline of Black Sturgeon Lake, or building permits for shoreline structures. significant portions of the development are located in a known documented archaeological site where such development would not have been permitted even if applications had been received. Additionally, the property owners have shown a disregard for the environment and the water quality of the lake by releasing wastewater directly onto the property with no septic system in place. Given the nature of the issues identified with the unpermitted development and use of the property, I am unable to recommend approval of a temporary use bylaw at this time. It is my further recommendation that no further approval should be considered for any development or use of the property until existing unpermitted structures have been removed, the area of the property zoned environmental protection has been restored to a natural state, and the applicants have taken the necessary step of hiring a licensed professional archaeologist to assess the damage and provide recommendations and conditions for future development. That concludes our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Any person may express his or her views of the application, and a record will be kept of all comments. When speaking, I would ask you to give your name and your address, please. At this time, is there any member of public who wishes to speak in favor of the application? See none. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak in opposition of the application? Welcome, Gloria.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor. My name is Gloria Mann. I live on 214B Wider Drive in Kenora. Thank you for the chance to speak at this meeting. I support the refusal of this application, or the proposed amendment. I'd like to add a few more comments. And as the City Council members, you have the power to go further than just requesting people or property owners who are in contravention of the city bylaws to voluntarily comply. In this case, especially the dock that was built either by the previous owners or the owner must be removed, and the person responsible be held accountable, incur the cost to remove it, and given a monetary fine. That piece of property is protected as per Kevin's recommendation report. Our bylaw officers, or officer, I'm not sure how many we have, must be able to impose monetary fines, not only set a time limit on removal, but also referral to other proper authorities, in, for example, MNR or Ministry of Environment, or other fines or charges when not in compliance with city bylaws and property assessments. The bylaw officer cannot and should not just rely on public complaints or concerns. Take a drive around the city, see property owners not in compliance with the bylaws. This should allow the officer to approach the owner on said property to speak and request compliance. The excuses for not allowing this to happen because of cumbersome paperwork to issue a fine or not enough man-hours or budget to do this is just a cop-out by the city and unfair to the city's taxpayers who do comply with the bylaws. There are so many camper trailers showing up on Black Sturgeon and are making our permanent homes, or making them their permanent summer homes. It is and will continue to bring down the value of my home and other homes on this lake. There's no movement to the removal of other camper trailers. I just witnessed one on the weekend having a company install underground electrical right to their camper trailer. So that would mean to me that this is okay to have a camper trailer on a piece of property. With the new zoning plan being created, it must address the trailer camper issues, not only on Black Sturgeon, but all over the city, as well as implementing effective monetary and legal consequences of non-compliance of bylaws if found by all new and existing property owners, especially when they're
Kevin's report, they're putting their wastewater on the property. What's gonna happen to them? The slap on the hand, oh, sorry, oh, I won't do it again. Of course he won't do it again, they're gonna put a new house now. But there should be consequences for these people that don't follow the bylaws. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gloria. At this time, are any members of council have any discussion or questions? Seeing none. Since there's no further questions, I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Okay, you're good. Your turn. Yeah, Mike's your turn. Yeah. So before we start the closed session, we have lunch, so just,
I think I have a close item, right?
You know what? If this continues,
Yeah,
we
you
should
know.
just look in the capital budget of